If you get into the habit of using fresh herbs in the kitchen, you can very often transform something quite ordinary into something very special. And you don't even have to have green fingers. I must be the only person who's almost got a mint hedge here, and it's just grown all by itself. I've done nothing to it. Mind you, I do use quite a lot of mint. This is the rosemary here, which I've had for about 22 years, and even though it's old and it looks quite ugly, there's some lovely young tender leaves, and I use quite a lot of them all the time. In front of me here is parsley. This is the curly leaf parsley, but this year I'm actually growing flat leaf or continental parsley. Although it has the same flavour, it actually looks better as a garnish sometimes, prettier than the other parsley. Now over here we've got the sages. The green sage has got a lovely pretty flower on it. And this is red sage, quite nice for stuffings. In fact, traditionally, British butchers used to put red sage in old-fashioned sausages. There's tarragon down there. That's getting a bit woody now, so I've got some new tarragon round the corner. And then over here, some younger plants, marjoram, and some new chives here. My chives got too old, so I put some new bushes in. Don't forget to keep snipping chives if you've got them. The more you snip them, the more you get. And something I want to show you, which is perhaps something you haven't come across before, is winter chives. Now, winter chives go on all through the winter. I've even been out here, sometimes in the snow, and harvested those. You might find they're called Welsh onions, but that's certainly worth looking into. Then there's the rather sad story of the little plant next door. That was meant to be lovely, luscious red basil leaves, but unfortunately I've got a pair of pheasants here, and they are rather partial. I think they're gourmet pheasants to basil, and so they've eaten them, so that's a shame. Now here I've got sorrel. Sorrel doesn't look very attractive, it's rather ugly, but it is delicious. It's like spinach, a sort of acidy, lemony spinach, lovely with fish, and very nice in soups as well. And because my thyme got very old, I've got some nice new bushes of thyme there. But what if you haven't got a garden? Well, never mind. I've got something else to show you that might be interesting. Most herbs can be grown from seed or bought as young plants and reared very successfully on a sunny windowsill, as long as you remember to keep them well watered. I'm afraid this indoor herb garden won't go on a windowsill because I use absolutely masses and masses of this one. This is basil, said to be the king of herbs. It really does have a lovely flavour with so many things, that sort of Mediterranean summer taste. Goes very well with tomatoes. Now, because of the vagaries of the English summer, it's a bit risky to put it outside, so I just put masses and masses in pots like this. And then it grows and grows quite high. I hope I can show it to you later on. And if you just pick out the little white flowers that grow, it will go on and on, yielding leaves. I've even had it almost up to Christmas sometimes. So that's basil. We'll be coming back to that later in the series. But the herb I want to talk to you about now is this one. This is tarragon. This is quite different in appearance. It's got a slightly aniseed flavour, and I think it's a very aristocratic herb. Goes beautifully with salmon. We used a bit last week. And it also goes very, very well with chicken. If you put a bit of tarragon in with any roast chicken, it'll transform it, give it a lovely flavour. But today, we're not going to do a roast chicken. We're going to do chicken in a sherry and tarragon sauce, which is just that little bit different. And in my pot here, my cooking pot, I've been cooking browning chicken. It's a small chicken, 3.5 pounds, and it's been jointed into 8 pieces. Now, you can get your butcher to do that for you, or you can do what I did, and that was look up the cookery course where there's illustrations. I always have to do it because I can never remember, and it'll show you how to join it into 8. Right, I've also got the first of the summer seasoned shallots here. I've got 12. This is going to serve 4 people. And my next door neighbour gave me shallots straight out of the garden, and I just thought they looked so pretty. I wanted you to see some. When they're just first pulled, this is what they look like. Aren't they lovely? First sign of summer, those coming out of the garden. Now, if you can't get hold of shallots, don't worry. You can use small onions, or you can just slice an onion. Use sliced onions. Now, these here are not small shallots. These here are actually garlic cloves. And each person gets one whole. And when it's cooked in the sauce, it sort of transforms and becomes mellow. It's not strong like it is when it's raw. Now, over here I've got the pieces of chicken that have already been browned, and they're just going to go back now and join the rest. But one important point I have to tell you is you put them in upside down. I'm sorry about this, it's ugly side up. Because what happens is they're going to have a sauce and they're cooked one side for halfway through in the sauce and then the other side in the sauce. Just put them back in, tucking them around the shallots. And I just want to tell you about this dish I've got here. This is a fired terracotta pot, and you can actually put it on top of the stove like this, or you can put it in the oven. You can actually serve things on the table straight from it, so it's quite a nice little pot to have, or rather it's quite a big one, this one. This is, I think, 9 inches. Now the next ingredient we're going to have is a very special one. This is Amontillado sherry, and it's got a lovely nutty brown colour, as you can see there, and it has the same kind of lovely nutty brown flavour in a sauce. Now I've got 3/4 of a pint here altogether, and this is just going to go in and join the chicken joints. And the next ingredient is this one here. This is sherry vinegar, which we used in the last programme. And this goes very well, obviously, with sherry in this sauce. And I'm going to use 1/4 of a pint altogether. Just get that measured up. Lovely dark colour, which also adds a nice gloss to the sauce. So this will go in now to join the sherry. And although I seasoned the chicken joints, I'm just going to put a tiny bit more seasoning in. Turn the heat up a bit. And then the star goes in, and the star, of course, is this, which is our lovely tarragon leaves. And you need about 2 tablespoons of tarragon leaves altogether. The measurement isn't vital. I usually strip down 2 stalks, roughly the size that you've seen. It's all beginning to get a nice little bit of colour now. Now what happens to this is you need to turn the heat down as low as it'll go now. It shouldn't really be bubbling this much. And then you leave it for 45 minutes to cook, and then halfway through you just turn the pieces of chicken back over right way up. And the reason for that is, as you can see, it's sitting in the juices here. And we just want to get it both sides in. So turn them over at half time, leave it for 45 minutes. And then the final ingredient is a tablespoonful of creme fraiche. And what you do with that is, right at the end, you just work it into the sauce. Mix it around. You get a lovely marbled effect to begin with, and then to mingle it in with those juices. And you can see how many juices now there are. It's reduced down, so it's got a lovely concentrated flavour. And then that's all ready now to go to the table. Way back in the 16th century, an East Anglian farmer wrote a book on good husbandry. His name was Thomas Tusser, and in the book he listed pages of aromatic plants and herbs and leaves. But 2 that he didn't include in his book are these 2 here. The first one is fresh coriander, which is quite easy to grow, and we'll be using this quite a lot in the summer series. And this one here, which is lemongrass. Lemongrass is used in Oriental cooking and has the most wonderful lemony fragrance and flavour. It doesn't look very attractive, but what you have to do when you look at it is think of leeks and treat it in the same way. You take off the tough tops here and the outer leaves, and then you chop the white part, the pale part, and use it in recipes. Now the odd thing is that the nicest cold soup in the world, which is vichyssoise made with leeks, is difficult to make in the summer because there aren't any leeks around. But if you make it with lemongrass and coriander, you'll find the most wonderful marriage of flavours. First add 4 chopped stems of lemongrass to 10 ounces of finely chopped new potatoes and sauté them in 2 ounces of butter. Then add 2 medium chopped onions and cook for 10 minutes before adding some stock, which you make with the vegetable trimmings and some coriander stalks. After that, add 5 fluid ounces of milk and 1½ ounces of chopped fresh coriander leaves. Season and simmer for 25 minutes. Blend the soup until smooth, then pass it through a sieve and chill it very thoroughly. Serve in chilled bowls with ice, chopped spring onion, a little more fresh coriander, and then garnish with a slice of lemon. Now when you go out to buy salad leaves, it's almost like being back in Thomas Tusser's time, because there's so many salad leaves available. It's a bewildering variety, really. So I've got a few here that we can run through and I can tell you about. This one here is called escarole, and that's got quite a nice sort of meaty flavour. It's a bit short on crunch, I think, unless you eat it very fresh. This one here is frisée, or sometimes called curly endive. If you put this in a polythene bag, it keeps for ages in the fridge, and I think that's very nice in a simple salad on its own. Good one, that one. This one here looks very pretty and interesting, but it really is a bit dull. It's a cosmetic lettuce, really. It looks like a can-can, frilled can-can skirt. It's a bit soggy and limp, and it doesn't actually have very much flavour. This one next door, by contrast, is lovely and crisp. This is chicory, heads of chicory, and these leaves are really crisp, and they do have a nice flavour. This one here is an acquired taste. It looks very good, very pretty. It's called radicchio. I've got a friend who's addicted to it, but I find the leaves a little bit bitter. So if you don't like bitter things, I don't think you'd probably like that one very much. This one is the sort of first cousin of that one. It's called Lollo Biondo, and I think that's a very good name for it. I think it's beyond really much in a salad. This one's a star. This one's Kos lettuce. This has got the flavour and the crunch and everything going for it. So is this one over here, which is Webb's Wonder. A nice heart of Webb's Wonder, I think, makes a lovely salad. This one here is another sort of designer-ish lettuce. This is called oak leaf, but it does have quite a nice flavour, and it is good to mix in with salads when you want something to look really pretty. Finally, this one here is the star of this summer for me. It's called rocket, and in fact Tusser mentions it, and it was used in Elizabethan cooking times. It's a really English salad leaf, that, and it has a buttery, crunchy flavour. I tried to grow some this year, but something's been eating it all. It looks like lace, so I can't show it to you. But I'd like to see more of that in the shops, because I think that's one of the greatest salad leaves of all.
No salad is complete without a really good dressing. This one uses balsamic vinegar, which has a very special flavour. First take a peeled clove of garlic, then blend it to a paste with some rock salt. Add a teaspoon of mustard powder, then work this in together with some black pepper. Next add 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar and 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Then mix again. Pour the whole lot into a little jar and shake well before serving. Use sparingly, just enough to coat the leaves and make them glisten.
Now I want to show you what must be the greatest salad ever invented, or rather my version of it, and that is the Caesar salad. And this depends on having some very light little crisp croutons on the top. And so we're going to start back to front and make the croutons first, because I want to show you the very best way to make little croutons of bread. We start off in this salad, we're using 2 ounces with 2 slices of bread here, crusts removed, and I find white bread is better. Cut it into fingers, first of all, and then just take the knife across the fingers and cut it into small cubes. Now, sometimes people fry croutons in the frying pan, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do them in the oven, which is an awful lot better. Now, they go into a little bowl, and they're going to have some other flavourings added. First of all, a tablespoon of Parmesan cheese, just sprinkled over, and then a clove of garlic, and a tablespoon of nice, fruity, extra virgin olive oil, because they need to have nice flavour, these. Tablespoon of olive oil. And then what you do is just give that a good old mix, because what you want to happen there is you want the bread to absorb the oil and the cheese and the garlic before it goes into the oven. You're going to have a bit more time to spend on that than I am. The next thing you do is you just put it onto a baking sheet, spread it out evenly, and really it's so easy, there's no effort involved in these. They just get now popped into the oven. You preheat the oven to gas mark 4, or whatever the equivalents are, and you just pop them into the oven for 10 minutes. I have to say something about the 10 minutes. do put a timer on and don't go and answer the phone, because what happens is they get burnt very, very easily. 10 minutes goes by very, very fast. So do put the timer on and watch them, and don't have so many charred ones that I've had over the years. Now we're going to make the dressing that goes on the Caesar salad. This is very simple if you've got a food processor. And you just take, first of all, an egg, break that into the bowl of the processor, one large egg, that is. And then you're going to add some flavourings. The first one, good old English ingredient, this one, Worcester sauce. Nice kick in it. And this is going to have half a teaspoon of Worcester sauce. And then some mustard powder. And I think mustard powder, again, in dressings, English powdered mustard has a much better flavour than the sort of ready mixed mustard and the Dijons in a dressing like this. Mustard powder next. Then you put in a whole clove of garlic. The processor will take care of the garlic. That'll mash it up. And then here I've got the contents of a tin of anchovies. And what I'm going to do is, this is a 2-ounce tin. The oil has been drained off. I'm just going to put 2 anchovies into the rest. That gets whizzed up into the dressing. And the rest of the anchovies go into the salad later. And then the next ingredient is the juice of a lime. Now you can use a lemon, but a lime has a really lovely sort of sharp, fragrant, summery flavour. Now just switch the motor on and blend those ingredients thoroughly. The anchovy and the garlic are getting all mashed up into a pulp with the egg and the lime juice. And then when they're thoroughly blended, we're going to add some oil. And what I've got here is 1/4 pint of, again, nice extra virgin fruity olive oil. You can see by the colour there. And we're going to slightly emulsify this sauce, which means put the motor on and let the oil just go in a steady stream. Now, there is something else in with this oil, and that's the oil, do you remember, from the tin of anchovies? I told you I drained it off. Well, I put it in there because that oil has some good flavour for this. Just pour it in a steady stream. Now, sometimes people have problems with emulsified sauces because they curdle. And the classic mayonnaise, of course, is adding oil slowly to egg yolks. But if you use a whole egg, as I have done here, there's no danger of that at all. You won't have any problems. As long as you just pour it in a thin, steady stream. You can speed up the speed a bit if you want to. Now, as it begins to mix, you can get a little bit more bold with the oil at the end. What you should end up with is a sauce that's the consistency of pouring cream. So we'll just take this over now and finish making the salad by dressing it. We'll just get rid of the blade here. And over here, I've got a bowl of mixed leaves. Now, I call this one mixed leaf Caesar salad. Traditionally, it's always made with this one, cos lettuce. But I like a mixture, so I've got cos lettuce, Webb's lettuce, and the lovely rocket as well. And it's going to have one more ingredient before I just put the dressing on, and that is those anchovies I showed you earlier. And what we're going to do with those is just snip them with the scissors over the leaves. There's quite a lot of anchovy flavour in this, and I think that's what gives it such a lovely, sort of really gutsy, outdoor, summery flavour. Also, this adds a bit of contrast to the leaves, nice sort of pinky brown colour. There we are. Now we will pour in the dressing. I just want to show you a little bit of kitchen equipment before I do that, because I think this is something rather special, very simple. It's a spatula, but it's a very, very good spatula. It's made sort of like a little shovel shape, spoon shape, and it really does clean dishes and bowls better than anything I've ever used before. So that's something to recommend. Now, just take the dressing out. You can see the consistency as it's going in there. Now, I wanted to show you my spatula, and in fact it's not really sticking much, so I'll show it to you again on something else that we make later on. Now, that's fairly clean, isn't it? Now, there's the dressing. What we're going to do now is go in there with a spoon and a fork and give it a nice bit of tossing. And the idea here is to get all the leaves beautifully glistening and coated with that gorgeous dressing. You might want to taste a leaf here and add a little bit of pepper and salt. I didn't put any in the beginning because, of course, there is salt in the anchovies, but before you serve it, it's a good idea to just have a little taste there and see. One more ingredient, sorry, two more. But the first one is Parmesan cheese, and this is Reggio Parmesan cheese, which is the strong one, and I've got 1.5 ounces here. And that's just going to be sprinkled over the leaves. And then we're going to give it one more little toss. And then the last ingredient is the one we started out with, and that's the crisp, crunchy croutons that are waiting there in the side wings. And when you make croutons, whatever you do, hide them, because people start to eat them, and you find when you go to make the salad, you haven't got any left. They're very, very Moorish croutons, especially with the cheese. So that's the last ingredient now. Now this will make a very aristocratic first course at a summer dinner party or a lovely lunch outside in the garden for 4 people.
Either way, I hope when you make this, you will agree with me that it really is the best salad in the world.
I always remember Margaret Coster, one of our greatest cookery writers, writing in her 4 Seasons cookbook about the sound of tart green gooseberries raining down into the pan like hailstones. And to me, that heralds the sound of summer and the sound of some lovely gooseberry recipes. And I'm going to show you a really splendid gooseberry recipe today. This is something that tastes good, and if you're in a hurry, is very, very easy to make. You start off in a nice wide, shallow baking dish. This one's 9 inches, with 2 pounds of gooseberries. And traditionally in England, gooseberries have always had a wonderful affinity with the flavour of elderflower heads. And we used to go out and collect elderflower heads, wrap them in muslin and cook them with the gooseberries to impart their flavour. But now, some clever person has invented this lovely stuff, which is elderflower cordial. And this is much more easy. And so for this recipe, I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of this elderflower cordial and just sprinkle it over the gooseberries. And because when they're first in season, they're quite sharp, you need quite a bit of sugar in them. So I've got 4 ounces here of caster sugar, so we'll sprinkle that in. And if you're wondering what this recipe is called, I'm about to tell you that it's called English gooseberry cobbler. And now we're going to make the cobbler topping. And if you've got a food processor, it really is actually made in moments. And you start off with 8 ounces of sifted flour, and this has had added to it 3 teaspoons of baking powder and half a teaspoon of salt. So that goes into the goblet of the processor first. And then another easy thing about this recipe is that you can use butter straight from the refrigerator. It's supposed to be quite hard from the refrigerator, and that's good for people like me who always forget to take it out in time for pastry. Slice it up a little bit into chunks before it goes in. And if you want to use margarine, you can use margarine, that's okay. Lid goes on. And then you just switch on for about 30 seconds. What you want is the butter and the flour to resemble fine breadcrumbs. So we'll switch on. Shaking about a bit because the butter is hard. When you have the early summer fruits like rhubarb and gooseberries, you need to have cooked recipes for these because obviously you can't eat them raw like you can the raspberries and strawberries later on. And this is a real winner, this one. Now, when the mixture resembles fine breadcrumbs, the next thing you do is you add this, which is buttermilk. Now, I've got 6 fluid ounces of buttermilk. If you look in the supermarket, round the dairy counter, You'll probably find buttermilk. It's quite widely distributed now, but don't worry if you can't find it. You can actually use ordinary milk and you'll still have a lovely cobbler. Now we're just going to give that another little mix. And what happens now is once the buttermilk gets blended into the rest of the ingredients, you end up with a really sort of funny, sludgy mixture. And you think, what on earth am I going to do with that? It looks awful. But don't worry, you're not going to have to roll it out or anything nasty like that. All that happens is take it over to the gooseberries, just take away the blade and clean some of the gunge off. It really is a very, very funny, sticky mixture, this. And then all you do is you just take spoonfuls of the mixture and just pop them on top of the gooseberries. It's as simple as this. Just like that, haphazardly. What happens is when it goes in the oven, you'll find the scone mixture begins to rise up and spread out, but it doesn't quite join up. And so you get sort of lovely little pools of gooseberries in between, which looks really, really pretty. Now, the difference between an English and an American cobbler is the American one has a kind of scone pastry which goes underneath and on top. But this one is so easy to do. You just put the blobs on top, and then it has one more ingredient, and this is actually crushed sugar cubes. I've got 6 Demerara sugar cubes here, and they've been crushed quite coarsely. If you don't have sugar cubes, you can just put Demerara sugar on top. But if you crush them like this, coarsely, then you get a lovely sort of crusty, crunchy topping, which I think just finishes this off beautifully. Now this goes into a hot oven, gas mark 7, or the equivalent, and you leave it there on a reasonably high shelf for about 25 to 30 minutes until the scone topping has become lovely and crusty and golden.
Here are some of the other gooseberry recipes that appear in the book. First, a gooseberry fool. This one's made with a puree of gooseberries and some lovely thick Greek yoghurt. These are gooseberry jellies. They're made with sparkling wine and flavoured with elderflower cordial. This is something called rice cream, made with an Italian arborio rice and served with a gooseberry puree. And finally, some sunny gooseberry preserve to brighten up your breakfasts in the winter.
So here we are. This is our gooseberry cobbler. And, of course, you don't have to be tied down to making this just with gooseberries. You can make it with any kind of fruit. As the season goes on, it's nice with all different kinds of fruits. Well, I think the nicest thing to serve with a gooseberry cobbler is actually gooseberry and elderflower ice cream. But if you want to know how to make that, you'll have to come back and join me next time when our programme is going to be all about ice cream. So I'll see you then.